Welcome back to another Sales Hacker live event. If you're a regular, welcome back. If this is your first time, we're so excited you're here. Thank you all for choosing to spend some time with us today. We are going to give some time for everybody to roll in. It takes a couple of minutes for people to roll in here. So while we do that, we're going to do some housekeeping. So first off, we just want today to be super interactive. So go ahead and open up your chat. Make sure it's set to panelists and attendees. That way everyone can see your message, introduce yourself, and we want to kick this off with just a question that's relevant. And so tell us, what is the biggest challenge that you're facing with virtual selling? Anything goes. So go ahead and drop that in the chat, and that'll get us warmed up here. So during the conversation, when you have questions for the panel, please put those in the Q&A box, and we'll pull those in as we go and as it makes sense. So today we have brought together a really incredible panel from Outreach, Honeycomb, BrightTalk, and they're going to share the strategies and tools that they've used to overcome these virtual selling challenges. They're going to talk about enabling sellers remotely, giving them what they need to remove mundane activities, sell better, and overall how to feel more connected in a virtual environment with buyers and even coworkers. So I'm so excited for this conversation. Again, if you are just rolling in, please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your number one challenge for selling in a virtual environment. And I am going to turn it over to the folks that you came here to hear from. So let's do a round of introductions. Michael, I'll start with you. Will you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Michael Wild from Honeycomb. Usually go by Wild. Check me out on LinkedIn. And we make some really awesome software that helps customers like Outreach with observability for the production systems. And I'm super stoked to be hanging out with the rest of the crew today.
Thanks so much for joining us. Joe, let's go to you. Will you introduce yourself?
You got it. So my name's Joe Hornigold. I'm over here at BrightTalk, and BrightTalk is essentially the B2B version of YouTube. Think of TED Talks meets YouTube, where business professionals come to learn and grow, and we help connect companies to their ideal viewers or people that they want to sell to. And we've been working with our team here as we've been growing rapidly and had over 90 different new joiners this year alone. So this is quite the timely conversation of having new people coming in the virtual space.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. Shay, let's hear from you.
Yeah, hi. I'm excited to be here. My name is Shay Keeler. I'm a sales manager at Outreach, and Outreach is a sales engagement tool. So essentially helps every sales rep or manager work more efficiently and effectively and close more deals. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Excited to have you, Shay. And last but absolutely not least, Mohammed, I'd love to hear from you. Mohammed, for some context, is going to be helping us just facilitate some really awesome discussion today. So he's going to kick us off with this first question. And Mohammed, will you start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure, 100%. So Mohammed Kiswani, account executive here at Outreach, working alongside Shay as well. Individual contributor, working on the East Coast accounts, and I help organizations to adopt Outreach and increase their revenue.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to have you. And thank you everyone who is joining and rolling in. We're really excited to get this conversation kicked off. So if you're new, please introduce yourself, drop your LinkedIn link if you want, ask your questions in the Q&A, and this is going to be fun, and we'll keep it nice and interactive. So Mohammed, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, so let's start the conversation, everybody. So, as Sam mentioned, the convo is about, going virtual, enabling teams, and really just doing what we do in face-to-face online right now. So I guess I'll start it off. We got Shay, we got Mike, we got Joseph. We all know in real life, when you talk to someone face to face, you can't record a call, you can't transcribe it. There's a lot of things you can't do in real person that you can do online. So maybe we'll just kick it off here. I mean, Shay, you're a manager, you lead a team here, about 6-7 people. Give us your thoughts. I mean, how do you think it's changing for the better, and where do you see some opportunity here?
Yeah, so I think it's hard on both fronts, whether you're like onboarding into a new role or if you're talking to customers every day. I think Zoom fatigue is very real, and that is my least favorite part of this new world, virtual world that we live in. But I think in other ways you can get more creative and figure out ways to connect with people in a whole different level that you could before. I know one of the things I like to do with my reps is just like give them a phone call versus Zooms. Instead of staring at yourself, like just have that interaction in a different way. And so I think it's exciting. I think we're kind of hitting that point now where it's setting in that we're in this, and we probably will not be back into the office for quite some time. So how can you get creative and come up with different ways to engage with people?
Awesome. Thanks, Shay. Appreciate it. What about you, Michael? What do you think?
Yeah, those are some great points, Shay. And I do also just sometimes like to pick up the phone and talk to teammates, and because I respect the fact that they're sitting in front of Slack, we're getting an amazing amount of work done, and they have all these interruptions as well. So just getting somebody on the phone is great. The other thing is you could never learn about the weird things that people do on Zoom, like in real time, right? So different people have funny effects, or some of them have cool backgrounds or things like that. It does allow you to show a personality side and a way to connect with people that we probably wouldn't figure out in real time if we were in front of a client.
That's a great point, 100%. I mean, I can relate to that too. One thing I do is after every big call I have like a manager or something, I would like to call my manager, Alex, and be like, hey, what do you think about that? How was it? And do it away from the screen, like on a phone call outside or something. Sometimes FaceTime, just to get a break from the whole, and on the Zoom definitely helps me as a seller to kind of get away from the whole Zoom fatigue. Joseph, what about you, man? Let's hear your thoughts.
I love all the points that have been talked about so far, and as we'll probably find out in the next hour or so, that I'm quite weird and eccentric when it comes to things, because I like to think outside the box and do things differently. So obviously having phone calls is a great way to do it, but Zoom fatigue is real. But the other side of it is that since we're not in office, that camaraderie of just going to get a coffee, taking a walk outside, breaking away from the day-to-day normal of everything. So we've even done it where, maybe I'm dating myself, but MTV Cribs, where instead of having like a team meeting, everyone take their computer around their house, show off something fun that is there, so we can kind of get to know each other a little bit further. Take a call outside, go work outside, or meet up at a coffee place or something. Do something to change it up, instead of sitting inside the house every single day in front of Zoom, and trying to change up the energy, the mentality of selling in a virtual world.
That's a really good point. I guess what question I got for you on the follow-up is like how I think it's become more normalized for people to have weird workplaces, where before it was like, oh, I got to look like I'm in the office. But now we all realize like, no, like stop trying to hide stuff. Like I got my pull-up bar in the back and I got my cat running around, and things happen. Do you think it's more normal now for folks to like, have people in the background, just take a call outside instead of inside? Is it more common than trying to be so professional?
I think it is. I mean, I know we all have kind of that bokeh blurred background here, even on this call, but someone like me, where I have Pokemon, flower or plants, baseball stuff all around it, it just shows off the personality. And there's been a bunch of times on, we would do discovery calls with our SDR team, we would do closing calls with our sales executives, or I would do continued enablement with our existing clients, and you would not believe how much more engagement we get from people looking at the background and just saying, hey, what's that photo? That's from Chicago. It's where I'm from. No, really. And then, we get into these side tangents, and it's just that next layer of conversation that you can get from being a little bit more personalized.
For sure. So I guess that would actually take me to my next topic, which is like building rapport early on in the call. So I can imagine if I started and I was a big Pokemon fan, I'd probably be like, hey, like I see that thing in the back. I'm really not a Pokemon fan, but like conversation starter, is that are you thinking that's a good way to build rapport in this remote world? Because now you have your personality behind you versus if it was a black screen, Joe looks like a normal guy. But now you have so much personality and things to talk about before I even hear your voice, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And thank you for calling me a normal guy, because that's maybe the only person in the world who's ever said that. But no, you're 100% right. Like, people can start seeing who they're going to be dealing with, because I think it's an age-old thing for sellers, is that people don't buy from companies, they buy from people that
Right.
they like, who they're interested in. So, even just being comfortable in your own home, maybe you're more comfortable in an office, but being relaxed, and it can bring out a different layer of your sales technique, because you're in your comfortable environment. You're in your own little world where you can just, flourish. I think it's a big thing as well. So taking that Zoom fatigue and making it a positive by having it a fun place to work.
Love that. I definitely agree with all that, Joseph, and myself. So I guess Shay and Michael, how do you feel about, like, do you have any tips for the audience and for us about, connecting with prospects, customers in the virtual world? Do you have any tips? I mean, I see Michael here just pretending at the Apple Store. That probably works, right?
Maybe I'm there. Who knows, right? It's kind of interesting is how, I'm sure that many folks listening to this, like lately, especially post-COVID, you see somebody on a call and they're in an office and you're like, are you in a real office?
Yeah.
Right? And, sometimes, they answer, yeah, I'm in the office. Wow, it's great. And sometimes the answer is, yeah, I'm here. It's the only one. I'm the only one here. But, I find that, what point that one of the other panelists made is like the camaraderie of like being on Zoom and we're doing our thing. But, on the other hand, it's made it possible for us to do things that we have not been able to do. Like, aside from travel, which is, to me, I actually like travel because you can share experiences that you can't on Zoom. Just, the weird car crash that happened like outside the office, or, the coffee place you went to, or the dinner you had, which is super great. I have some great stories from some of my customers as well. But on the other hand, it's becoming super efficient, and some of the technology that I use every day, such as Outreach Kaya, it actually helps me spend more time with, building rapport with the customer, because I'm sitting here with my hands mostly like this and not transcribing everything, because you actually can't do that in real life. You can't, like as you were saying, Mohammed, you can't like sit in front of a conference room and transcribe everything, because that's just weird, right? On the other hand, you can't remember everything the client says in real life, and just some of the things that we've seen with virtual conferencing and other tools have just made it selling. It's taken it to a different level, maybe not a next level, but just a different level that lets us do different things, and I think clients also appreciate that to a certain extent.
Yeah, I would agree. I think building rapport and having that is similar to what it was prior to the world we live in. Like, hey, how can I quickly look at Joe's background and get something that I want to talk to him about, and like have that icebreaker? I would say I think the biggest challenge that I've witnessed and like heard from a lot of my reps is the communication and interaction between like companies itself. Like, not actually like talking to a prospect on a demo, but it's how do I get close with other AEs within my org, or how do I go and build that? And we typically get on a Zoom and it's like we've got an agenda and we want to accomplish it as fast as possible, because then we got to jump to the next one. So I've found that that's like one of the biggest challenges, is building that time to have that human interaction, because we're not going to the bathroom and saying hi to someone on the way or grabbing a cup of coffee. So I'd say that's something that I'm still struggling with, on how to build that into my time and make sure I'm not just like jumping into my agenda as soon as I get on a call with my reps.
Yeah, one of the things my manager always asks me from one-on-one, just like, hey, like, how you doing? How's life? How was your weekend? Before we do all that good stuff. And I think it's truly important, because we all know it's always like a end goal for every meeting. And so you're right, Shay. Like, how do you humanize it a little bit so that we don't feel like we're on auto mode the whole time? Get off a meeting, check an email, next thing, and it just does get overwhelming. And so the more time we can get back, similar to what Michael said about just, you can't type like this in real life with a person. You'd be really weird to be taking notes. But now on the computer, on a Zoom meeting, it's very normal to have kind of technology with us. So I guess that kind of takes us to our next topic here, which is more like, how do we enable sellers to be more aware, present, and accurate in the moment when they're asked a question? So I guess I'm curious, maybe Shay, we can start off with you. Your reps use Kaya, obviously. Can you give us some ideas and examples of how they are, being asked a question and they're able to get some assistance in real time efficiently while focusing on being an active listener?
Yeah, so I've onboarded over 15 reps that have never sold before onto Plaid this year, and Kaya has been a huge part into my success and my rep success, more importantly. And what Kaya does is it essentially enables them real time. So if Joe were to ask me a question and I was on the call with them, and maybe it was like, how much is your seat price, or what's the 3 difference between you and your biggest competitor? It's actually going to pop up and show me and give me those talking points. So instead of being that nervous AE that's like, oh shit, what did my manager tell me to write? And what did they tell me to say here? I can just read that and confidently repeat it back, which has helped accelerate confidence, because it takes a long time for a rep to feel fully confident. I'm sure all of us can relate to that. And so that's something that I found extremely helpful in this virtual world, and something we may not have used as much if we were, in person all the time.
Awesome, Shay. That's awesome. Appreciate you sharing that. What about you, Joseph? I'm being kind of like on the SDR leadership side over there. How do you feel about that? Any other tips and kind of feedback you have on how you're helping your team doing that?
Yeah, so a lot of great points, and Kaya is a really just AI interactive tool that will listen to the conversation and have listen for keywords that pop up. And a different way that we've used it from everything else is to also pop in with more thought-provoking or leading questions that are come there. So maybe it listens to the word pricing and you're like, well, it's not that part of the conversation yet. So here are some questions you have to ask beforehand. Or, it's this competitor that you've never heard of before. Well, maybe it's, what features are you looking for? So, that's always a big part. But to answer your question, Mohammed, that I really like to do with this, to start building rapport and to go deeper, that I have for so again, I'm a weird hybrid where I'm our SDR manager in the US, but also enable and onboard people for the company. So AEs, CSMs, and SDRs, a little bit of everything. So everyone has to deal with these questions. And the thing that I like to teach back is it's real time that this person's here, and you have to think, and your brain needs a second to catch up. So what I like to have our reps do is repeat the question back to the client first before answering. So as soon as they come in with a question, or they say, hey, who are your biggest 3 competitors? Take a second, go, so who are our biggest 3 competitors? It's a great question that we get all the time. So it gives you a chance to slow down and not hit them with the, and having those awkward pauses. So it really shows that you're paying attention, because right, I'm sure multiple people have multiple monitors at home, so it's really easy to be like, so tell me about your strategy, and look over here at an email that's coming in, or set up the calendar. So to show that you're actively listening, that you're coming in there, and then it gives your brain a second to catch up, is a little tool that we've been doing.
I love that. I think it's a great point, kind of rephrasing what they said. 1, shows you're listening. 2, gives you time, because it's the reality. As fast as we can think, the reality is when you rephrase it and think about it, you'll probably say less ums and more succinct answer that will be a better answer, for sure. What about you, Michael? Obviously you've been, in this market, very experienced for a while. Give us your thoughts on kind of, how you're using Kaya, or in general, better functioning remotely versus when you were face to face. Can you share some wisdom with us?
Yeah, sure. That was an awesome tip, Joseph, as far as repeating questions, not just for clarifying the question, but actually priming Kaya to give you the thing if the customer said it in a different phrase. Anyways, so tip of the hour. There's a couple things. I'm Honeycomb's most tenured account executive. I've been here for 3 years. I think I'm the most tenured employee in life as well. So I'm about as enabled as you can possibly get. Okay. But what's really cool is I'm a heavy user. I was kind of like the pioneer of some of these things at Honeycomb, and I'm a heavy user of it, which means there's a year plus of recordings and content from me and how I talk about our solution, or how I, address an objection, or how I, work on pricing, or how I might, negotiate, because we try to actually have Kaya in most of the meetings, unless the customer or the prospect says, hey, can you just like, pull the curtains down. And being able to let the new employees at Honeycomb, whether they work in product marketing, whether they're an SDR or in demand gen or an AE, or even a customer success person, because they have Kaya licenses as well at Honeycomb. Look at the recordings, kind of search through them, see, learn faster. I mean, the content cards are awesome because they pop up in real time. But from the enablement standpoint, that's really cool. And then, as I said before, like, I generally try not to sit and transcribe. I can, but I use a lot of the features so that I can, like sometimes Mark might have my hand on the mouse, just clicking on something, saying, this is something I want to remember later on. It's just allowed me to highlight things that are happening, and also build rapport with the customer, because I'm doing the normal things you do. I'm like wiping my nose, messing with my glasses. Like, you're a normal person that you would really be like, instead of this robotic bald dude like capturing everything. And it's been a really helpful thing for both enablement and in meetings.
That's a really good perspective on that, Michael. You said something that kind of caught with me. You've been there for, you have like a year and a half worth of a library of the best calls. So if you hire a new AE, they have the advantage of saying, hey, you know what, top rep Michael, been killing it. It comes in, he can just watch your recordings, and all of a sudden he knows, he can hear the talk tracks that you've been doing, and have that really. Actually, I'll share a story on that, and Shay will kind of laugh at this too, because she knows this. When I first started here, I think, Shay, you were still a rep, right, at that point when I first started Outreach?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so one of the things that, one of my mentors, Josh Braun, he was like, I asked him, hey, how do you get really good at sales? And he said, are you guys familiar with Josh Braun? Anybody here? It's pretty popular on LinkedIn. He said, just find the best rep and replicate them. And so the best thing I did, I just came around and I was like, hey, who's the best rep? And they gave me a couple names. And, I went on, just watched some recordings, and I literally transcribed their talk tracks, what they're doing, so I can memorize it. And very quickly, I sound like I've been here for 6 years, even though I was here for like 6 weeks. So that's the power of using technology. We didn't have that back in the day. And you can't really do much of that if it was just no technology, all face-to-face, because you have to go memorize everything beforehand. So there's a lot of value to having the kind of the post-call, the post-call understanding. But the follow-up here that I got is like, how do we help reps on the call live? That's the true, 2022 problem. On the call, someone's asking, they don't know. How do you help them get coached without having to coach them after the case? So maybe Shay or Michael or Joseph, anybody want to talk about like the talk time and questions asked, stuff like that?
Yeah, totally. Oh. Yeah, there's a new most tools that do call analysis have some sort of talk time thing. Like if you're using something after the fact, it's pretty easy for most of them to say, hey, wow, we're talking way too much. I'm sure if we analyze this call, that would also be the case. But being able to see this in real time is actually pretty powerful, because there are times when you actually need to talk a lot, right? If you're doing a presentation, or a solution architect, sales engineer, or whatever type of person like that in the industry that the audience is doing their demo, or maybe they're going over a statement of work. But sometimes we can be too evangelical and step on the customer, right? So having an understanding of like a meter who's talking more in real time is pretty cool. Or the other thing is, you got 9 people got invited to this meeting. Like, they all introduced themselves at the beginning, but you might not remember that, hey, Leonid hasn't said anything all meeting. And seeing a meter of that is actually kind of a cool thing to keep them engaged as well.
If I can jump in off of that, so Wild, I love that. And for those who are listening who don't have the benefit of the technology, like a Kaya or something else, there's a little trick that I like to do to keep them engaged. So pen, right? I mean, sure, I can't be hand typing notes, but I like to think of this. If I'm talking, I'll hold the pen in my left hand because I'm talking. It's something physical, tangible. I'm holding on to it, and I go, well, maybe I've been talking for a really long time, and I see that Shay or Sam or Wild haven't answered anything for what. I'll put that into my hand where I'll take my notes or I'll do something so I can physically see, hey, it's time to have someone else come in that's here. But, for those real-time notes, that's where having some form of technology that's there, or even using like an LMS system afterwards to then, listen into the calls, break it down afterwards and learn from this on multiple times in your own user's time. And Mohammed, I have to throw it back to you because, how many other AEs, how many other reps are doing what you did and taking the time out of their own day to go and find all of those calls and to say, well, let me just copy what this person's doing, and build it on their own. So just a couple ideas I have.
I love your tips. I mean, Joseph, that's awesome. I'm gonna start holding, my iPhone and my pen and just switching it back and forth, and remembering when not to talk. Right?
I was gonna say you need like a news article that comes out with your tips every day, or do it on LinkedIn so we can all start to follow them.
It's on my TikTok. Just go ahead and hit it.
All right, there you go.
7 seconds at a time. You got it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love that. I think it's really helpful. I'm a severe over talker, so I've had to figure out over the years before I could tell when I was talking too much or not, like how to cheat the system. A couple of things that I've done that work really well is build in specific open-ended questions at certain points in a demo or an IM, whatever really you struggle, so you can go to those every time, and it helps like make sure that you're engaging people. And I also, one of the things, and anyone that's ever worked for me knows that I hate when people don't engage everyone in a room, because sometimes the quietest person could be the biggest voice in the room to make the decision after all. And so I think it's important to engage every single person on a call, whether or not they're engaged or not, call on them and just get them talking. So you can, sometimes it like loosens people up, or you realize that you're really not hitting the ball at all and you need to get things on track. So I think those are both two important things to do as well.
Awesome insight, Shay, for that as well. So a couple stories too, like, when I think about using this in real time, I had actually a big demo about 4 weeks ago with like 17 people, including a CRO for a company. And one of the awesome ways that we actually leveraged this was, we had noticed that the CRO had like 2% talk time. And so immediately seeing that, we just immediately said, hey, a CRO, let me just show you something. Obviously, we're selling the platform, so we're selling Kaya too. But even if you weren't selling Kaya, knowing if your main decision maker isn't really talking much, and actually calling that out, saying, hey, I noticed that you've spoken 2% of the time, want to give you a chance to actually, make sure that you give your input. First of all, it shows that you care. And most importantly too, without technology helping a seller do this, like who can estimate the number of time, like the minutes that someone talked to or didn't in real life? It's really hard. But when you have data that tells you, hey, time to up this here, your pause time is 1 second. We all know pausing should be like 4 or 5 between questions. Like really using data to drive it, I think is one of the things where it's never going to go back to how it was, because people, may not know how to go back to talking in person in real life. They're so used to technology, which could be a downfall, to be honest, if I'm being real. So it's definitely a skill to have, but also not to forget how to use it in real life. So what about like winning? What about actually selling better and actually winning more meetings? I mean, anybody have any ideas here around how enabling sellers in real time will kind of contribute to that?
I can field this one and kick us off here. So, I mean,
Sure.
I think too, it starts off with breaking through like some of the digital noise to even get the meeting itself. And I think from there comes from opportunity creation and being totally different. So literally before this, we were on with my SDR team as a meeting of how to be different with our messaging, because think of your own personal inbox of how many emails you get a day from things or from other different sales reps or from something else that's there. So how are you going to be different in the space? And once you can make a personalized connection, that helps with that meeting. So we've been talking about being personal and having conversations within the meeting itself. But what about beforehand? Inside of that, I think about them as like digital clues, little digital fingerprints that are on the internet. So what have you liked on LinkedIn? What have you been posting? What's your company been doing? Story that I've told to our clients a bunch, but to make everyone else laugh. So our company's name is BrightTalk. Bright like a light, talk like we're doing now. Very simple, BrightTalk. President of our company gets on average 40 different types of outreach a day, LinkedIn, emails, phone calls, all of it. The best one he ever got was, hey, Ryan, I see you're the president of Bright Stuff. Like, okay, you're literally at a computer that can show you, click a button, what your company is, what is it that they do and everything. So to take the time to break through and be different in your messaging, show what you know, what the company does, who they are, to sound a little bit different, makes the lead or the client on the other end go, you know what can they do? They're clearly doing something different. That leads into the conversation itself of sales virtually, of this may be a different conversation that's here. I think that's a huge point, is crafting some different type of messaging and hitting on timing.
Yeah, I think I get a lot of emails, and I think people that get creative and like find different nuggets and bring them up, like, doesn't even have to be about the company. It could be just about me. I'm like, oh, I'm more inclined to reply to you because you caught my attention by something. Or like even within the subject lines when they get creative and I click on something, I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize this was a prospect email. I literally thought this was like an internal or a company email. So I think it's taking that extra 5 minutes if you need to think outside the box and not just do that generic template that it really does. Like 80 dials and just generic emails don't really work in the world we live in anymore. So how can you get creative? And one way that I found really successful in the world is starting to follow your top prospects, but then comment on the things that they're commenting on. And it works to end up in a conversations a lot of times if you're following them on LinkedIn threads, and you can kind of tee exactly into that, which I found to be helpful.
Like that, Shay. Like what I'm hearing from you here is getting out of the norm and standing out and using kind of other technology like LinkedIn and social following to make it more personal, right? Not just, and as an AE, and you manage a team of AEs yourself, like it's you're not going to stand out if you say what everyone's saying. Everyone's talking about the same thing. Here's what we do. Here's what we are. Talk to me because I'm so awesome. But and you actually put the time and energy to show that you're a real person, and you reference something personable. Again, on the call, it helps you, but also getting the meeting, if you're talking about pipeline generation, definitely is a big differentiator.
I think something with that too, because Shay, that's what I teach everyone at our company to do. But a lot of pushback that we get is, well, isn't that going to be creepy? It's like, well, no, it's not creepy. It's not, like we all have the smart homes, the phones, the Alexas, all of that listen in. And, it would be creepy if they're like, hey, at 10:30 p.m., you're like, I'm hungry. I would love, and that's why you have, the coffee being advertised to. But it's simple as like, really interested in your LinkedIn, the point you made, and putting the focus of them first, not talking like, hey, I'm a seller here at this company and I do this and I notice that, because people just get turned off. So you can say, while coming across your LinkedIn, fascinated of what you have, was impressed with your history, your experience or something, because then people kind of like, if you think about it, people would rather talk about themselves than anything. It's the topic they spend 100% of the time with. So they're like, just keep going. I am amazing. Keep saying it. And they're willing to read the next line and the next line and the next.
Yeah. I mean, they put it on the internet, right? Like, in my industry, because we provide solutions for, engineering teams, software engineering teams, they're not huge on LinkedIn, right? And then they're bigger on Twitter, but Twitter is a whole different, sphere of how you interact with them. But what I've started to find is most of them also write blogs, okay? And if you're writing a blog and that is something interesting, if someone comments, like if you actually read that person's blog and you find something interesting about it, and it might be 2 years ago, I'm actually working on an intro right now to an executive to hook up, my CEO with this person. And if this blog post was from a couple of years ago, I can imagine that, I'm sure it'll never get through to him. I'm sure it'll end up in a spam. But if that came to me, I'd be like, wow, you actually read that. And the thing I commented on 2 years ago, or the point I made, someone actually read it. People put these things out there, not just to be self-aggrandizing, but to share the information with the world as well. Or, also in my industry, a lot of engineers do conference talks as well. So there's a lot of stuff on YouTube that you also might find that your prospects or your clients are putting out there that, might educate you, or you also might be able to. Another thing you like to do is take that and pass it on to another prospect. Or, hey, there's a blog post from this person, or a YouTube video on this, great technology. I think you should meet this guy, right? So I've done that also. Like, hey, I want nothing from either of you two, but you're in the same industry. You're both smart. I'm introing you to each other, and I'm getting out of the way. And it does a really cool service by connecting people that might not be on the same platforms, and also, maybe giving them content of things that are in common, and you end up, being at least someone who is looking out beyond what normally people would expect.
Okay, typical mistake on Zoom, right? Being on mute. I think that's a great point as well. Someone puts on information online, they want you to find it. It's not creepy if they put it on there. Now, if you stalk someone on Instagram or Facebook and then find something really private and put it in a prospecting email, that's probably creepy, right? So wouldn't recommend that to anybody. But yeah, you're right, 100%. I mean, as an AE, I can also share some of the success I've seen from my peers and kind of on my team and myself is always, a customized message. I like to do a lot of video recordings, record a good hack is actually opening up their LinkedIn, showing their picture on the big, recording a video and having that be the GIF animation. Because if Michael, you get a video from me, I'm trying to prospect to you, or Shay, or Joseph, or Sam, and your face is right there, and there's a 30-second video, and it's like an animated GIF, I would assume 90% of people would open that, even if they didn't really want to hear anything. So that definitely is the name of the game. I actually have an idea here, a question. What are you seeing here in terms of paying attention? I know when I'm on Zoom, one of my biggest pet peeves, and we all do it, but it's just when you're on a call with someone and they're doing other stuff. How do you keep the attention? I think we saw as a question early on here. Like, how do you keep the lead on a call to keep them engaged? How are you using technology to make sure that you are engaging the people that you're talking to, and that they're not getting bored or doing multitasking or other stuff while you're trying to, keep the meeting solid? Any kind of feedback on that?
I think the one thing is I take anything as a positive. Even if you get a no in an email, that's a positive that you don't have to keep working the account or anything. But if you're seeing that your lead on technology, on Zoom or whatever platform you're using for your call is distracted, whatever you're trying to sell or whatever you're messaging on isn't resonating with them, and they're like, you know what, my time is worth more on this email or over here, because you're missing the point. You're missing the mark of what their pain point could be. So why not make it more interactive? Hey, while I'm sharing the screen, Mohammed, what stat is popping off on this page to you? What day-to-day are you seeing? How is this different from what you're currently using from today? Hey, I'm curious. And that's the biggest thing that all of our AEs use is I'm curious. Because it just opens up a door where, kind of challenging the prospect of, hey, Wild, I'm curious, how are you hitting your conversions every single month? Or, hey, Shay, what is the biggest challenge with working from home? I'm curious how you're handling it, because then that's kind of breaking down that barrier. And as well, having a little bit of personality, toss a joke out there, throw an analogy left and right once in a while, or, just maybe even throw it back to them. Hey, I'm sure I talked a lot. What stood out to you, and can I get you a few minutes back to your day? And that's kind of what we call the upfront contract. Hey, if we sit here and get through this fast enough, maybe I can give you a few minutes back in the day. Go grab another coffee. From there, people are like, cool, I'm more than happy to answer any single thing that you want to have.
Yeah, to add to that though, like there's a certain group dynamic on these calls that you can't escape. And if we're sitting on site, we're on site, and one day that will be a thing again. We're on site, right? And if I actually got all like 6 to 10 people in a conference room, you're actually probably still going to have some distraction, right? You're still going to have, like, you can't really like go, all right, I'm going to like stalk all these 14 people and like have them, I'm going to make sure that I make them talk, right? But sometimes it, you know, it all depends on the role that they play in the meeting. Like if you're looking, you know, at like a model like RACI, where like some people are basically like just there to get informed. Some people are, you know, active stakeholders. And I think it's like okay to sometimes just let people go, because they not let them leave the call, but accept the fact that they're going to get some Slack message that comes in. They're still in the meeting, and you know, now might not be the time that you get their attention, but maybe it's that POC setup call or that negotiation call that they're going to be there. And I think some of this we just can't escape, because you put more than, you know, 4 people in a Zoom meeting, there's going to be like, you know, you put 6, you get 10 in there, you get 15 on a demo. There's no way that like they're all going to really be focused. And that's sometimes what I'll do is like, hey, or about one of my essays is great. Pierre, he's like, okay, I know you're doing stuff, right? Because we're dealing with engineers. I know you're doing stuff. Might be sending emails. You're probably on Slack. That's totally cool. We're going to do the demo right now. So, you know, pause what you're doing if you have the time and watch this. Or while he's doing the demo, he's like, you might have drifted off a bit, but check this out. Like, come back to the screen. This you're going to want to see, because this is the best part of the day. And then just sort of let the rest of it kind of happen.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually. It makes sense, because you're acknowledging that you can never have everyone's attention full on 100%. Like, there's just no way around it. So it's like,
no, I mean, like, I can't pay attention the whole time. I have to like find different wallpapers for this webinar.
I was going to say, is that automated or is that manual? Because you were doing it such consistently. I was like, did he set up a hack on Zoom where it was just automated?
No, it's me multitasking. It's me illustrating the exact point that we're making right now. So.
Right. I guess.
There we go.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
I do, though, I think dependent. Obviously, if you have 15 people in a room, it'd be really awkward to call on someone. But kind of like one of my philosophies that I tell my reps is like, if you're thinking it, say it. And I think what such young sellers make the mistake of is they just keep demoing to someone that is completely not engaged. Right. And you can't do that, because they're never going to show up to the next call and the next call and the next call. So I think it's okay, you know, with a smile on your face and in a very nice way to ask, like, in the right way, like, hey, is this like not interesting to you, or however you want to phrase it. And you either get one of two things: you don't waste your time with that person because they're like, nope, this is completely not what I want to talk about. Great, let's move on. Or they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I was doing this, like, now I'm in. And it's really a win-win for the seller either way. But it definitely is a little uncomfortable when you're not used to being that upfront on a call.
Yeah, and I think that's what we do a lot of times too. Like if I'm leading an enablement session with people, I let them know before we get in, this will be interactive, stay on your toes. I may ask you a question, and the question doesn't even have to be product related. I can ask very goofy questions and somehow relate it back to the product or something. But Shay, you're completely right. If people want to try to outsell or something, be like, there's a magical word, there's something in here that I'm going to say if I keep rambling on fast enough, if I keep talking fast enough, that eventually they're going to be listening to me, and then people just tune that out even faster. So, you know, toss it back to the person and just, hey, you tell me where it needs to go. I think of it like, if anyone remembers Plinko from Price is Right, where the puck jumps all over the place, is we don't know where the conversation is going to go. I'll let the prospect lead it. Tell me what's your pain point. What's interesting to you? Tell me what you do day to day. That's fascinating that you say that, because I got a fix for you.
And that's what the best sellers do. And so they don't have to follow this like specific track that they go like do everything. They go with what the prospect wants. And sometimes you show something that you were not prepared, but you got their pain point and you showed it, and that's how you win the deal. Mm-hmm.
100%. What comes to my mind too is actually, you know, technology too, like people having their video on. I know numerous times I've taught, specifically when you have less people on the meeting, like if it's like a one-on-two, one-on-one, and you're talking to them, and you see their eyes. Like numerous times, I'll be on a demo, for example, and Shay, you know this, and they'll be on mute, and then you'll see them kind of like their eyebrows kind of go up, or like, their mouth starts moving. They want to say something. So being able to be like audible ready and be like, hey, Joe, like I saw you move your mouth there. Did you have a question? And like 9 times out of 10, I'd be like, yeah, actually. I actually had something to say. So being that visual person as well, very good skill to also teach your reps and make sure that they're not just looking at themselves in the video, but looking at the other people and trying to read the room, even though they're not in the same room. I guess here, with a quick time check, knowing that we have like 10, 15-ish minutes, I guess I'm curious, anybody in the audience, if you have any like feedback or questions, anything you'd like to hear our opinions about regarding, remote selling and enabling teams remotely. It'd be great also to kind of hear about, I see Russ, Sean, Suzanne, a bunch of people here. If you have any questions or things you want us to talk about, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll be happy to kind of answer some questions and give our opinions if you're interested. And also for now too, like, Joseph and Shay, Michael, what else would you think is relevant to discuss, given the topic that we're talking about today? Is there anything else that comes to mind that you think would be relevant to chat about?
I was just about to do that. So thanks for the tee up, Mohammed. I think
wow.
One of the biggest things, you read my mind there. I think one of the biggest things is, when we were in office, a lot of times people would just sit with their headphones on and work, or when they would go to get another coffee or to the bathroom or to go outside or something, would it always be about work? Or maybe they would kind of, vent about, oh my God, this one client, or I see you keep opening the email and you never answer back or anything. What we've really seen help with is like hopping into a Zoom to bounce ideas off of each other. Let me share my screen. This person has literally opened this email 7 times. Okay, well, what other data have you collected? How else have you gotten this? So you can use it as almost like to a benefit of, look at the analytics that are here. Here's exactly when I sent it. Here's the thread of everything, and just working together to bounce ideas off of each other, I think is incredibly beneficial. We have what's called our TAC sessions for like tactical approach. So every week we just sit and everyone shares an email. Okay, cool. Why did you send that? What is here? Have you ever thought about, anything else? I think that's the better approach to go with too. And people go, wow, I never thought of it that way, and kind of roll from it.
Yeah, there's also some other critical tools that we use every day. Zoom is awesome and all of that, but Slack has become an absolute game changer to how a lot of us do business. When Slack introduced shared channels, which is when I can take a channel from one company, hook it up to a channel from another, and we're sitting there in a channel just like we would normally do, it sped the flow of negotiation and conversation so fast that you wouldn't, I don't think anybody could have predicted that chat was going to be just like what we started to do with each other. Like, I literally am having a call with the prospect's legal right after this, and the prospect hooked me up with them in email, but then the prospect immediately made a shared channel. And so we could prepare for this call that's happening in an hour. We got a bunch of stuff out of the way, and when's that happening? 5:30, 6 p.m., right? Because we're doing things on our phone in Slack, and it's just convenient, right?
Right.
It's a lot less overhead than email. And then the other thing is, like, using shared documents has been really helpful. So, like, I was showing Mohammed something last week. I have this really cool investment calculator, which I, can set up for a customer, and I share it with them directly. So they're seeing some transparency. Or, people are working on proof of concept documents and things like that, or plans in Google Docs or Quip with their customers. That with their prospects, like, it's not just Zoom that's changed it. We've got a whole bunch of collaborative technologies that I've seen people are starting to use that are just really, really awesome. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but it's been working.
I agree 100%. Technology, game changer. We have our own Slack channels for, 4 or 5 of my colleagues, and we're always sharing best practices and stuff like that, that you usually do that in person in an office, but you just can't. And so leveraging kind of that remote world to make sure people have a bond that's not just a Friday team meeting that no one talks in because they just don't want to talk. It's like you want to talk about it. Or even we have an iMessage group chat with a bunch of guys or girls, like, on the team, and that's just what we do, and that's just more personable, and encouraging that kind of thing will definitely foster a good working relationship from home. Shay, you took off your thing off mute. So what do you think?
Oh yeah, I was gonna go off of Joe's. I think technology has helped make a lot. I agree with Michael for sure. I think it's important to make those moments for teams that they can learn from one another, like what you were saying about you do the emails, because what is gone are the days of like being able to just listen to a rep and implement everything they say. I remember I would sit next to this Ryan Jander. I'd listen to everything Ryan Jander said. I'd write it down and I'd say it on my next call. And we can't do that anymore. And that's impacting like how fast reps progress and that sharing between each other. So I think it's so important for like leadership to create spaces where you can do that, whether it's to talk about deals or how to approach different calls or what's working and what's not working. I think that's a huge miss that I don't know if we've totally been able to replicate being in this remote world. And hopefully we get even more ways as we move on.
Hopefully. There's a question that popped up here from Russ about what's your best tip for keeping remote folks authentically engaged in brainstorming, like you can when you're calling in a conference room together face to face, because Zoom sucks when more than one person talks at a time.
I'll kick this one off. It's actually something that my manager here at BrightTalk taught me is keep any kind of your feedback or your thoughts towards the end and go around the room to grab everything. So it's really awkward if Shay just said one thing and I go, yep, that's amazing, and there's 14 other people still around to talk, and it's like, well, then I'm not going to, because he already said that this is amazing, the person leaving the call. So I think the best tip for me is to literally say like, hey, this will be interactive. I want to hear everyone's thoughts. Cool. And pick someone else out that's there. And maybe some people don't like that, but I feel like it's really effective. So if someone is dominating the Zoom talk and you see someone doing one of these, or, their eyes are wandering, just go, hey, that's really great. So Wild, can you piggyback off that? What are your thoughts? And literally call them out and let them do it. And then you, as the moderator for the Zoom call, wind it all up into a close at the end. Because if you give feedback after every single thing that's there, then people start to close off and are like, oh, cool, then this is just moving right along. Be my tip.
I think you have to be more prescriptive. So I don't think I totally agree with that. I think you have to create space to do that. So whatever the topic is that you want to brainstorm or talk about, I think you've got to create the space and have more of that be the goal of what you're going to talk about, where organically it would happen in the office. You'd be sitting around your desk. You'd all be done at the end of the day and you'd be like, hey, Michael, how do I respond to this email? Joe, what would you do on this? In the world we live in, some people do it, but we don't ever do it as much as we used to. So I create space with my team, like, hey, we're going to work on IM questions from 8 to 9 on Monday. Come with all your questions and let's talk about it. And here's what we're going to knock out. I think it creates still the organic conversation, but you just have to have a little bit more organization and be more prescriptive about how to get it. That's what I found.
Yeah, those are some good points, Shay. Like that session you're talking about does remind me of some PG sessions that we've done at Honeycomb, where it's like, all right, everybody, just going to block your calendar off. We're going to be on Zoom, and we're just going to write some content, right? And somebody would then play Spotify out there, and we're in there together, and somebody's got their screen shared. Another thing, especially for Russ, who asked this question, is look at the concept of what's called open spaces conversation. Okay. So when you're doing brainstorming, it's very difficult unless you basically say, okay, this is the time right now that everybody's going to write something down that we should probably talk about, or write some ideas down today. Then we did this at a conference years ago at Honeycomb, and it was actually live. So you'd write down something on a Post-it note and then take it up to the board. Everybody would write down a crap load of ideas. Then we'd sort of, combine all the ideas and say, these are in these 6 different buckets. Great. All right, let's vote on which of the 6 buckets that we're going to talk about and work on, right? At Honeycomb now, we actually do this with a product called Mural. It's like mural.co. And it's really simple. It's just kind of PowerPoint. You just get in there and draw boxes and type things in, but we're actually able to like orient, like we're putting all these little notes, and then somebody comes along, puts them together, and then we kind of vote. And then we're like, okay, we do this for product management, we do this for a bunch of things. All right, we're going to talk about, sorry, these 3 topics didn't make it. And we've done that with solution architects. All right, now we're going to focus on these 3. And the fact that we spent a limited time, like 8 minutes, okay, everybody go. And we're all doing this collaboratively, that now we've kind of gotten most of the brainstorming done. And then we're going to go ahead and sort of collapse that into an actual discussion. Because that's how good brainstorming is done, whether it's remote or actually in a room with people on a whiteboard.
I think that's great. I think it's awesome. I was checking out Mule right now. Actually, I did recognize the name. It's definitely more collaborative instead of that. So that's an awesome thing. Cool. Anybody else have any feedback to share about remote work and better equipping your teams? I know we're approaching kind of end of time here, so.
Awesome. I just want to jump in here and say that this was absolutely incredible. And there were so many actionable nuggets about how to be an effective seller remotely, how to listen actively and just truly be engaged. So I have enjoyed this so much. And if anyone missed anything or wants to watch this back, we're going to be sending out the recording within 24 hours. So thank you so much, Mohammed, Joe, Shay, Michael, and thank you to everyone who attended. If you want to keep this conversation going, we're the Sales Hacker team is always hanging out in the Sales Hacker community at saleshacker.com. So we always want to keep these conversations going. So thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you on Thursday for another live event. Appreciate you all.